Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. In the rural heartland of Colorado, I, Nathan, resided with my father and brother, Michael. Our lives took a dramatic turn when my parents divorced, leaving my brother and me in the care of our father while my sister, Christina, stayed with our mother. However, our memories held traces of a time when we were all together, guided by the presence of our enigmatic Aunt Abby. There was something peculiar about her. She would often contort her face in bizarre and almost inhuman ways, leaving an indelible mark on my young mind. As a 4-year-old, these strange visages terrified me, occasionally reducing me to tears. Little did I know that Aunt Abby's unsettling behavior would resurface later in my life. As the years went by, the custody arrangement dictated that my brother and I would spend the summers with our mother and Aunt Abby, while my sister remained with our father. I despised these trips because they meant being separated from my friends. Consequently, I resigned myself to spending most of my time indoors, engrossed in the world of an old PlayStation 3 or endlessly scrolling through videos on the internet. However, one fateful night, as the clock struck 9 or 10, Aunt Abby walked into the room where my brother and I were seated. The tone of her voice sent shivers down our spines, and it was clear she intended to unsettle us. She regaled us with an eerie tale, an old urban legend from Texas, about malevolent entities lurking within the trees. These creatures, as she described, would steal, skin, and masquerade as unsuspecting residents, twisting their features into grotesque forms. Aware of her attempt to frighten us, I dismissed her story and tried to find solace in sleep. Yet that night, I was abruptly awakened by my trembling brother, who managed to muster a barely audible voice. He pointed at the door, his body convulsing with fear. At first, I saw nothing amiss, but then I realized that the door, which I distinctly remembered shutting, was slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, a single eye stared back at us, its appearance grotesque, almost drooping out of its socket. Frozen in fear, we remained silent, with only the distant chirping of crickets piercing the night. After what felt like an eternity, I summoned the courage to rise from my tiny sleeping bag and cautiously approach the door. With each step, the eye widened, surpassing the bounds of any living creature. Finally, as I reached the door, the figure swiftly retreated from view. Scurrying into the hallway, I raced back to my sleeping bag, fighting the urge to scream. My brother remained motionless for several seconds before acknowledging my return. "Watch the window," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'll keep an eye on the door." Suddenly, my brother emitted a muffled scream, pulling me towards the window. What I saw there would forever haunt my nightmares. It was a creature so mutilated and drenched in blood that its appearance defied all comprehension. Without a moment's hesitation, the abomination scurried into the depths of the surrounding woods, disappearing from sight. That night, my brother and I found no solace in sleep. The following day, Aunt Abby was conspicuously absent from the house. Distressed, my mother contacted the authorities while my brother and I sat on the couch, our faces etched with horror. Sadly, Aunt Abby was discovered deceased, hanging from a tree branch, impaled upon it. Her body was a grisly sight, flayed in a manner that made recognition difficult. Strangely, the scent of decay did not emanate from her remains, confounding the investigators. However, they uncovered an unsettling truth during the autopsy. The body was not fresh. In fact, it was determined to be at least 15 years old, raising perplexing questions about the nature of Aunt Abby's demise. And so, the tale of shadows in the trees concluded with more questions than answers. The sinister presence that haunted my childhood memories had taken a malevolent turn, leading to Aunt Abby's horrifying fate. The unsolved mysteries surrounding her death would forever serve as a reminder of the darkness that can reside even in the most seemingly serene corners of our world. Story 2. My story begins a few years ago. I decided to use my computer skills to run a small darknet forum, mainly just to share information without censorship. At first, I was extremely paranoid about my site getting hacked and having my anonymity being compromised. So I went online and began to research everything that I would need to ensure my own safety. After countless days of scouring blogs, forums, and other material, I decided I was ready now. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't just buy a VPs and host the site offshore or whatever. So I decided to use my old laptop. After all, I wasn't planning on running a major website. So after setting the server up and what I thought was literally every single thing I could to do harden it against attack, I put the site online. Everything went great for a couple of months. Donations rolled in as the user base grew larger and larger. After around 5 months, the user base had gotten so big I had to upgrade and migrate everything to a new C, which I built just to host the forum, and from there everything seemed perfect. The site was running smoothly, and there were no issues with the migration until one day when I came home. And noticed the CC had frozen. I didn't think much to it, maybe just a software bug caused it, so I rebooted, and that's when it was clear to me something was wrong. The CC lit up and beeped a few times, then shut off, so I thought to myself, So it's a hardware issue, after a few hours trying to diagnose. The issue, I figured it out, and it turned out the RAM had been corrupted. I took it back to the store since it was still under warranty. The customer rep just told me it might have just been a faulty stick. When I got home, I replaced the stick of RAM and had the site back up and running within a few hours. Everything seemed to be perfect again. I apologized to the users for the downtime, and everyone seemed to be happy enough. Fast forward a few more months. The forum's been up and running for around a year and a half. Now, this is when things started to get really weird. I finished work on a Friday. It was a gorgeous day in the middle of summer. I came home, had something to eat, and sat down in front of my CE, and noticed I had a message. Upon opening the message, I realized that somewhere I'd messed up now. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like Assange or anything, so I don't really know why anybody would actually target me, but the world is a crazy place, so whatever. The message had my details from my name, address, bank details, passwords, private emails, private messages, everything from nearly every single device I owned. I freaked out and immediately took the PC offline. Turned my internet off, but little did I know that this guy had done his research after it. A couple of hours pacing my room, I received a text message. I know everything about you. The message was sent via some type of SIM service, so there was no way to trace it. And then my phone rang. Don't talk, just listen. I know everything there is to know about you. All I want is 2 Bitcoin, or things get worse. I'll send you a text with the wallet details. The phone call ended just as quickly as it started. I opened my laptop up and checked my Bitcoin wallet. There was enough left over from the donations just to pay this guy off, and hope that would be the end of it. So I entered the guy's details and sent the payment. My phone rang again. Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you. He hung up, panicking. I tried calling the number back, an automated message. Began to play the number you have dialed, has not been recognized. A few hours passed and I began to think to myself, well, maybe the last call was just him having fun and decided after a long day. I'd just go to bed. Sometime around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of banging at my front door. I jumped out of bed and turned on all the lights, grabbing a knife from the kitchen. I walked slowly towards the window and looked out. I could see someone standing by a car. When they spotted me, they got in and drove off it. Rushed to the door in hopes I might be able to get a license plate. But by the time I'd opened it, they'd already turned the corner as I turned. I noticed an envelope on the floor. I picked it up, went back inside and locked the door, closed the curtains and sat in the kitchen. I placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it for around half an hour, trying to muster up the courage to open it. Did these guys really come to my home? I thought to myself. After the half hour was up, I decided enough was enough. I opened the envelope and pictures fell out onto the counter. They were of me sleeping. These guys had not only been outside my house, they'd been inside whilst I was sleeping. The images had been edited and strange love hearts had been added next. To me. So now I was sufficiently freaked out. I didn't go back to sleep, and when the sun broke the darkness, I decided to head to the police station and tell them everything. I hadn't broken any laws. So I hoped they would just help me, at least after hours of explaining everything to them. They told me there was nothing they could do. At this point, I had never felt so alone in the world. I was scared of what this guy was planning for me. I didn't have the foggiest idea what I was supposed to do or expect. So I decided to wipe everything: my laptop, pops, and phone. I picked up everything I needed, stuffed it all into a bag, and decided to leave. I had a couple of friends that I knew I could rely on. So I called up my old buddy Marcus, and we met, had a few beers, and I explained everything to him. He offered me a place to stay, and I hoped that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. A few days later, it happened again. There was a knock at the door first thing in the morning. Me and Marcus both went out to find another envelope on the floor. Same thing, pictures of me sleeping, but these were in Marcus's house. I started freaking out again, and Marcus just said, "Okay, well, we need to do something, maybe set a trap or something." So we went over numerous ideas, everything you could think of, from cameras to baiting him. And we settled on the idea of staying up during the night and locking him in the room. We filled the bed up with pillows, set up cameras, and even barred the windows in the room. We hid in the room next door after. A few hours had passed. We heard the lock rattling on the front door, and we knew it was game time. We'd left the door just slightly ajar so we could see outside as he went past, and the moment he went into the room, we both sprung to action quickly as we could. We closed the door and locked it from outside using a chair and a metal bar. There was only one way he was getting out, and he'd have to destroy the door. We could see the silhouette of him as he paced the room quietly. It was creepy as fuck. We called the police as we kept an eye on him. At last, I thought I can finish this and move on with my life. Just as the police arrived, we noticed the guy take a gun out and place it to his head. He held a sign up, which read, "I love you," and he pulled the trigger. The police barged in, guns drawn, told us both to get the floor. We complied and shouted, "He's in there," pointing at the door. The police removed the makeshift lock and entered the room, called for an ambulance, and put me and Marcus in the back of a police car. I'd been sat in the interview room for a good couple of hours. I guess whilst they carried out the investigation, when a detective came in and sat down in front of me, opening a folder and placing pictures on the table. "Do you know her here?" I said, looking at the pictures, "No." I replied, confused. He looked at me and said, "This is the person who's been stalking you." And he then began to tell me they had visited her home and found a shrine with photos of me all over the place, from restaurants to the gym, even shopping. He went on to tell me that she'd been the one that sent the messages, made the phone calls, etc. And they'd also found a diary which had some kind of future plans for me and her. She wanted me to be her husband, and we'd been chatting for around a year and a half from the moment I started the forum. After I explained everything, the detective said I was lucky to be alive. She had actually planned to drug me and kidnap me. She had even made some makeshift lock bed so I wouldn't be able to escape. To this day, I feel lucky, and I haven't been on the dark web since. Story 3. My Aunt Bonnie and cousin Jedediah lived far out in the country. The first time I'd ever stayed overnight was a long time coming. For some reason, despite Jed and my closeness, there was always a tug and pull between our families. For years, I wanted to sleep over, and they denied it. We were adolescents now, and after what happened, I can see why they wanted us to mature a bit. It was early winter. We played baseball and shot bob guns in the yard all day, ate dinner, and asked to go outside just a little longer. Bonnie demanded we be in before dark, an understandable demand from a protective parent. But then Jed said something strange. "Stay with me. Don't go near the woods." "Why?" I asked. Wolves, his dad interrupted. Good enough for me. Something about my uncle's voice, however. When he said wolves sounded more like an excuse than a real reason. I'd never seen a wolf in Pennsylvania. We snuck to the tree line and just threw rocks as far as we could, listening for them to splash in the creek. If it did, that meant one of us had a hell of a throw. We both wanted to become baseball pitchers. We adhered to the rules, went inside at dusk, and slept through the night. Though I did wake up at one point to hear what sounded like laughter outside. The noise went in and out, and I never gave it a second thought. Probably neighbors. I didn't think of it again until we left and drove down the road leading away from the house. I asked my grandma where the neighbor's house was. They own 200 acres on all sides. There aren't neighbors for at least a mile in every direction. I felt momentarily uneasy, but it passed. My Aunt Bonnie was much more lenient the next visit, which was the following weekend. Just be in before dark. We know, without question, she emphatically stated. We had 2 hours until dark, when suddenly a warm front rolled in, and an ever-thickening fog came with it. You boys stay in the yard, Uncle Rick shouted authoritatively. You don't question Uncle Rick, a man who regularly handled venomous rattlesnakes with his bare hands. We were playing baseball, and as the formless smog continued to drift across the state, the sound of blaring warning sirens wailed from afar, incrementally increasing in decibel level up and back down in an eerie, howling sort of tone. It's the... No. Drive siren, Jed explained. Our fogs can be dangerous out here. We still could see within reasonable distances around us. Aunt Bonnie called for us to come in when Jed asked for one last pitch. I threw the ball and he slugged it far over my head and into the woods. I hadn't thought about the no woods rule since last time. I guess they assumed we'd comply. We intended to, but my uncalculated instinctual reaction was to follow the ball, and inadvertently, I sprinted beyond the tree line and into the woods, probably 50 yards in retrospect. The last thing I heard Jed cry out was no. Night was falling, and I'd run so far into the woods I couldn't see which direction was, which as the fog grew dense and uniform. My line of sight dwindled to 10 or 15 feet on all sides. Greg, Jedediah shouted. But I was busy looking for my new ball, which I swore hit the dry, crunching leaves not too far from me. When I realized I'd never find it, a bothersome reality set in amidst the cacophonous siren and screams for my name. Greg, Jed shouted once again, clearly emanating from my 6. 0. But as I paced in his direction, once again my name was shouted. From the opposite direction, deeper into the woods. The only thing which caused a chill to run through my blood was that the voice coming from the brush sounded like a little girl. Just as the trees began to crack and settle into the ever-shifting winds, I got a dreadful feeling. Hello! I cried out. Only the sound of cackling, high up into the trees and far away. I screamed, my tone infused with nervous distress, and then a rustling, like leaves dragged upon by something, coming at me from just ahead, getting closer and closer, and then spoken delicately like a young child, I heard. Greg, a gentle question, followed by a surreal and horrifying vision. 2 bare feet attached to bare legs, hovering just above the ground, toes dragging against the forest floor. Then, the sudden thumping of footsteps sprinting at me attached to a bright light. I was instantly pulled with inhuman strength by a tight grip. It was Uncle Rick. Go back home, he shouted angrily over my head. I was swept away, Uncle Rick urging me to run and not let go of his hand. We broke through the trees and barreled forward through the porch door, and then into the house in a blur. He locked the door frantically. I didn't even know what I saw. You don't know what's in those woods, he yelled as he shakily fastened the lock and hatch. Turn off the lights. This was the reason, I assumed. For the no woods. No night rule. I wasn't even sure of what I really saw. Nobody got angry. I didn't even get yelled at. Just told to go to our room and get to bed. Aunt Bonnie had an expression not of disappointment, but of concern. Jedediah looked frightened. We didn't say anything to each other. He went to bed and I got in my sleeping bag on Jed's floor. I couldn't fall asleep, only ponder what it was I'd actually seen in those woods. It got quiet for a while, but then I heard it. The same thing from last time. Laughter. Outside. Only it sounded like it was closer. In the yard. It sounded like children were chasing each other in circles around the house. It got silent, eventually. It would be a while before I got drowsy. Maybe an hour. And that's when I heard a sound at Jed's window. Delicate scratches like fingernails. Jed spoke out quietly. Don't pay attention to it. It will go away. I'm not sure what was more unsettling. The fact that Jed had been lying awake in scared silence for over an hour. Or the fact that the tapping on the window sounded like a person trying to get our attention. Our room was on the second floor. The next day, on the way home, I began to tell my grandma what had happened until she stopped me. We drove on in uncomfortable silence as I felt scolded for several miles. And then I finally asked, "What was it? Last night?" She took a puff of her cigarette and exhaled, blowing it out the cracked window. There are things around those woods that we don't understand. The house belongs to your family, but the forest will always belong to them. If they call your name, never answer.